Have you ever felt like most public debate is played by NPCs, real-life non-playable characters running on autopilot? They sound intelligent, but they're just echoing pre-programmed scripts. One economist saw this pattern decades ago and wrote the playbook to break free from it. That man was Thomas Sowell, and if you've actually read him instead of quoting him on Twitter, you know he hits us with the most uncomfortable truth of all. Reality is not optional. We'll get to the controversial stuff in a minute, but first, let's focus on how Sowell sees reality, because if you miss that, you miss everything. One of the most important things you can ever learn is the reality of limited resources, as Sowell writes. He calls out safety fanatics who are cracking down on the pollution of waterways involving traces of chemicals more minute than those found in even Evian water. And he asks, how much standard of living are we prepared to sacrifice to eliminate ever more remote dangers? After all, time, money, and energy are limited resources. Once you understand the limits Sowell talks about, of time, energy, money, everything else he writes becomes clearer. It's the master key. That's where some people stop, but Sowell goes further. Most ideological battles are about different visions of human nature. The unconstrained vision sees injustice and suffering as problems that can be solved if only the right people had enough power and compassion. The constrained vision sees human nature as limited and flawed, meaning the best we can do is manage trade-offs. This difference explains why some people push sweeping reforms to fix the world, while others ask, at what cost? Once you see this, you can't unsee it. So keep this in mind the next time you hear someone say or imply that some problem is easy to solve. Because the moment you hear solution, Sowell wants you asking, what's the trade-off? Who pays for it? And how? We need to start thinking this way together. This is where most people get Sowell wrong, because they stop at the surface. Culture, not tradition, not art. For Sowell, it's survival logic. In his famous Cultures trilogy, he writes that culture is a set of behaviors that has been shaped by geography, environment, and historical circumstance. Mountainous terrain, desert scarcity, access to oceans, all of these factors affect how groups think about work, time, education, risk, and trade-offs. Sowell therefore argues that these differences are practical evolutionary adaptations and that they explain why different groups develop differently. These cultural traits influence real-world outcomes. So the idea that every group should succeed equally ignores how different histories shape different paths. This is one of those ideas that changes how you watch the news or even how you talk to friends. Whose pre-programmed slogans do NPCs usually repeat? Those of phony intellectuals, of course. Sowell's readers know this instinctively. He went to Harvard and Columbia, but he's self-aware enough to write in Intellectuals and Society that intellectuals, those who work with words rather than in the physical world, have enormous influence but almost no accountability. They can make mistakes, and those mistakes don't get tested like an engineer's bridge. And here's the kicker. When their theories fail, you pay the price. They write the script, we live the consequences. Want to dive deeper into these insights? We've developed the Sowell Method, a step-by-step course that will transform how you analyze politics, economics, and everyday decisions. Subscribers to this channel get free access to the entire course. Just click below and discover what most people miss in today's debates. This lesson comes from a super obscure Sowell essay. As a baseball fan, I can tell you the idea that baseballs physically changed around 1920, that the game went from the dead ball era to the live ball era, has been gospel my whole life. It never even occurred to me to question it. But it occurred to Thomas Sowell. He makes a point that is so clear in hindsight. If this dead ball, live ball theory were true, the most powerful sluggers from the dead ball era would have remained so in the live ball era. Instead, he suggests it was the new players who arrived after Babe Ruth popularized the uppercut swing who became the home run hitters. I was floored, because it wasn't the equipment, it was the idea that changed. And ideas are contagious. The tendency to question everything is why classical liberals prefer markets over government, because markets are curious and open to ideas, open to being wrong, to learning, to improving. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Government agencies don't face the same pressure to adapt that markets do. Sowell knew this, and it's why he placed his bets on competition over control. Here's a framework I use constantly. It saves me from sloppy thinking. In Knowledge and Decisions, Sowell lays out how ideas can be classified by their relationship to the authentication process. He defines ideas that are systematically prepared for authentication as theories, while ideas which exempt themselves from any authentication process are myths. Sowell also draws a sharp line between three often confused concepts: disparity, discrimination, and prejudice. Disparities in income or education don't automatically prove injustice. The peoples of the Himalayas have never had an equal opportunity to become great seafarers, he wrote. Discrimination can occur without prejudice as a form of risk calculation. He points out, for example, that in some low-trust societies, people only do business with or hire their family members. Finally, prejudice, while real, isn't the only force shaping outcomes. This isn't comfortable, but it's reality, and reality is not optional. And by collapsing all disparities into accusations of injustice, we make real progress harder. In Knowledge and Decisions, his 1980 masterpiece, Sowell writes, "Humans need to consider how much we know and how well we know it. All things fall short of absolute certainty. Still, because we act, we must decide, and how decisively we can act depends on how well we know the consequences." He shows that decision-making is constrained, not just by how well we know the consequences of our actions, but also by what it costs to learn more. The point is, people don't make bad decisions because they're dumb. They make hard decisions with limited time, information, and options. This is why markets work, not because they're perfect, but because they take limitations into account. This also isn't abstract. This is your next conversation, your next decision, your next vote. And if this is the kind of thinking you've been craving, Sowell's clarity and brutal honesty, Students for Liberty has something for you. It's a crash course on how to think like Sowell and apply it to analyze news. The Sowell method. No fluff, no lectures. And since you're still here, you're already ahead of the crowd, so this is on the house. Just hit subscribe, click the link, and join the thinkers.